know that I am between you and your parking pass. And I also know that I'm between you and your raffle prizes, which for many of us teachers with limited resources in the classroom, that is a big deal. So I fully understand that, but I want to take a few minutes to talk about something that I think we're all passionate about in one way or another, and to really talk about some connections that were from many of the presentations, frankly, today, including the one that was just before me. As we were waiting, we were talking about that, and we thought, wow, how cool is this to be so close in our thought process, and yet at the same time have different presentations. We never conferred. But we know that primary sources with cultural heritage and with our families are really important. And that's what I want to talk about today, and it's really about the power of place in the classroom. Because the power of place makes a connection and ties National Common Core standards and, frankly, our workforce readiness standards to our students. So why does it matter? We heard today from Stephanie Hartman that the National Common Core are embedded in our Colorado State standards. And she said, well, they're not really there with social studies or with science. I beg to differ. I would argue that point because we're sitting here looking at these skills which we hear about every day. In fact, sometimes have really become passé now. We're like 21st century learning, please. How many of you guys have heard that in a professional development seminar and you're like, yeah, been there, done that. Come on, own up. I know there are some out there. Okay, so we think about that, but critical thinking, connections to our world are important. Contrast and comparisons and change over time. These themes are themes that are established not only within social studies, but within all of our content areas, and they tie to place. And so these are also embraced by the partnership of 21st century learning, which was here before National Common Core and the Chief Council of State School Officers say that 95 times fast, or any of the other organizations that have worked to push out the National Common Core. But when it comes back to the basic reality of what happens in our classroom, it really comes to what matters to us and what matters to our students to bring them to a higher level of growth. So I want to really talk about critical thinking about a place. And that picture right there, most of you would probably recognize it, Mesa Verde. And I want to spend some time today thinking about some resources that we often forget about in the Library of Congress. Because in our haste as a teacher or in our rush sometimes to get those quality resources, or in reality, I think sometimes too, when we've gotten into Pandora's box and we're so deep into the Library of Congress we couldn't get back to where we were even if we tried, we forget about some of those collections. So I'm going to talk a minute just about panoramic photos and also about regular photos. So here's a couple. These are from the Library of Congress collection and from some recent photos. If you take a look up here on the left-hand side, a recent photo of Cheeseman Park. Haunted Cheeseman. Tell that to a middle schooler and watch who shows up at 10 o'clock for a tour. Okay, they'll come, they really will. But then ask them to look about the history of it and look at the traditional postcard that's in the postcard collections and referenced in the photography division. And then come back to a panoramic photo. Does anybody know where that location is? It's actually Manitou Springs, okay? So if you look, these are the dwellings at Manitou Springs. Here's a current photo. This is a panoramic photo, an older one from the Library of Congress collection. Panoramic photos rock, especially when you give high schoolers spyglasses, or magnifying glasses. You think preschool? Let me tell you, your seniors love them too. And let them investigate that long photo. Interestingly enough, my kids, and frankly, some of my adults were thrilled because they said, look at this historic spot. This is so cool. They've been here for thousands of years. And I said, no, not really. And they looked and they said, what do you mean? And I said, they're transplanted. That is one of the first looky-loos of the West. Let's bring some cliff dwellings up to provide an amusement park for visitors. Funny enough today, our State Historic Fund has actually had some conversation. Should we landmark those? Because historically, they should belong in Arizona where they came from, but they were moved here for a purpose. and they do still hold some history. So that also brings you to, what are the myths and realities? What are those conversations about change? And what are those conversations about what you see? Your kids get this more than you know because of PicMonkey, Adobe, reimaging, digital photos. They know how to change things. Let's talk about the American Folklife Collection. How many of you guys have family in Colorado? Just raise your hand. That was here during the Dust Bowl, turn of the century. I'm glad to see that. I married into that family, Eastern Plains, and all I heard about, in fact, Grandma writes about it in her journals, and my family is French. They didn't experience this. They were in Montreal and Germany and overseas, but my husband's family did. And they talk about what it was like to live during this time. And Grandma talks about the songs that they used to sing in the field. She talks about the things they used to write and taking the mud off of the top of the bucket of water so that they would have something to drink. In fact, if you look at these pictures, an iconic picture here, Dorothea Lange, right? That's a Dorothea Lange picture that's in the Library of Congress collection, but you'll see here, the three that are here to the left. This bottom one right here is called the Black Blizzard, La Junta, pulled from the Library of Congress through the portal that comes through our nation's library to our Denver's West collection at our library. This one right here in the Eastern Plains near Burlington. And the one up here in the top, you can see some buildings in the back, that's Sheridan Boulevard. Any of you guys know 84th and Sheridan? Right in there? That's Sheridan. But there's a concept and a perception in history too that says, well, everything was black, everything was dust. Actually, this picture that is right here in the bottom and the picture at the top, within 70 miles of each other. The picture at the top is Twin Buttes Dam, a civilian conservation corps project that actually is documented in the Library of Congress that remained green and wet and beautiful during the Dust Bowl, and today still exists as a preserved area in Colorado. Comparing and contrasting, we do that, right? Isn't that a standard topic for constructed response in Colorado? Yeah, okay, I see nods. Absolutely. But isn't it interesting also to talk about other collections that can support us? Instead of just photos, why don't we use other documents to talk about what was it like then and now? And these include historic records that we may not think of on the onset. For example, a resource at History Colorado that is open for the asking for anybody who is a teacher and who is a student, called the Compass Program. The Compass Program holds all of the National Historic Register nominations and archaeological drawings of over 45,000 registered historic sites and non-registered eligible sites. And teachers can get in it for free. And these are some of the things they'll see. But this is also right out of our Library of Congress. So let's take a look, because here, instead of comparing and contrasting signs or clothing or something else, we're going to talk about place. High country ranching and low desert ranching. Again, a focus in Colorado. Take a look on the bottom side. You'll see that right over here on the left-hand side is down near Holly, Colorado. This is a stone house. Eastern Plains, not a lot of wood, right? They're going to use stone to build this. Here's the interior looking outside on the ranch. Flatland, grassland, desert. Water is a huge issue. Take a look at these pictures here. McGraw Ranch, Rocky Mountain National Park. Interestingly enough, we had some kids up there this summer, some of whom never knew that McGraw Ranch is right within the Rocky Mountain National Park boundaries, and that Rocky Mountain National Park is celebrating its 100th anniversary. In the Library of Congress collections, you're going to see drawings, scale drawings like this. How amazing to be able to take a picture here and compare it to a drawing. That drawing was made in the 80s. The pictures were taken much earlier. The Building America collections are just that. They are collections of historic places. They are black and white photos, documents. People went out to survey what place meant to Americans. And it's hidden. If you go into the American Memory section, you will find the Building America collections, and it opens up a whole nother conversation. We actually were talking about the McGraw Ranch piece because there's a conversation about having kids map out a regular homestead. And here I am standing in the museum, in the depot, talking to one of my colleagues, and one of my colleagues says, well, this map's totally wrong. And I said, why is that map wrong? She said, the outhouse is not 100 feet from the house. I said, 100 feet from the house. And one of my colleagues said, oh yeah, I know about that. Outhouses could only be so close to a house for sanitary reasons. She knew that fact. Wouldn't that be interesting to talk to a child about that and say, draw a scale map? How would you make that happen? So then, how do things change over time? This whole piece with Rocky Mountain National Park and its 100th anniversary, take a look at this. There is a historic tourist map, peak to peak highway, let's go visit. And this is going to be when the Eisenhower Highway, the Lincoln Highway, coming through Colfax right over here. It's going to take us all the way out along the mountains and up into the mountains so we can have some visit. Take a look at this picture in the left-hand side. That's opening day 100 years ago in Rocky Mountain National Park. And there's the lodge that you would have stayed in your perfectly wonderful outfits at the turn of the century. And today, here is a map of Rocky Mountain National Park that actually shows, you can see the higher peaks, shows the devastation that's happening because of pine beetle. All of these resources show what was then and what could be now in Rocky Mountain National Park. So there are a lot of resources that you can tackle. The Library of Congress is a huge one. But if you want more information about place, try the National Trust for Historic Preservation, History Colorado, the Teaching with Historic Places program, and think about presidential museums. Monticello in itself has some of the best resources, including many which are housed primarily at our nation's library, the macaroni machine drawing. Wouldn't it be great to have a conversation about that with your students? So before I talk about this, I want to close by saying something, because place has always been exceptionally important to me, and it came to me as a family experience. Just like most of you can relate from when you were very little to who you are now about certain places that were memorable, certain places that remind you of who you are and your cultural heritage. Remember that that transference of understanding and transference of learning makes a difference to your students. That's 21st century learning. I brought something. This box has been in my family for years. And I had a pretty stern German grandfather who had a very wonderful personality. He was a big teddy bear when you knew him, but you never said no to Grandpa. And he spoke German and he spoke French. And actually, honestly, 20 years ago yesterday, my husband brought me to my grandfather's bedside. He was, we were not married at the time. We came to his bedside so that my husband could let him know that he had asked me to marry him. And my grandfather was passing away at that time. And he said something in French to my grandmother, which I don't remember, because you can imagine what kind of emotional experience that was for me. My grandfather lived away from me in Canada, so we had traveled up to see him. So it was very hard to see him that way. Then we got married in June, and this box was given to me. This box, as I was growing up, was never allowed to be touched. It was one of those things that was Grandpa's. We knew it was. You can see the top right here. It's hand carved. I didn't know the story until we opened it when we got married. And inside was a simple piece of paper and 3 stones. And the simple piece of paper that was in said, "L'histoire pour vous," which in French means history for you. And he told my grandmother that as the first granddaughter who had gotten married, he trusted us to share the cultural heritage. And the 3 stones that are in there include a fireplace stone from Coburg, Germany, from the first family homestead in 1801. Include the stone that was off of the porch of our family house in Quebec, which was given to us by a French medal from the French government as our family came to settle here. And then a piece of the slate patio that was the first home that my grandfather brought my grandmother to in Los Angeles when he became an American citizen. I'm a first-generation American, and I'm proud to be an American, and I am proud to be able to share my cultural heritage. So in thinking about all of this, my husband knows that place plays an important role in our family. We hope that we share our history and our background with our family. As ending words today, you've heard many, many different things from all of the different presenters. But what you have heard, and not so openly said, but I want to encourage you to think about, you are the manner to create common ground with your students. You are the person who can transform your classroom to bring every single person together to common ground, no matter what color, what background, what heritage, or what place they're from. And the way you can do that is through interactive experiential learning using primary sources and technology. And honestly, I hope that you take that chance and reflect on how you are letting them appreciate their history while sharing your life with them. This last picture right here says, experience it, explore it, and preserve it. This is a very close program to my heart, which TPS has supported in the past to help us bring primary sources to kids. And it is an opportunity for you, every single one of you in this room, to bring students to live Colorado history. You may not know that Colorado history has to be taught in 4th grade and an actual state statute, 8th grade, and in high school as well. But this provides a scholarship-full opportunity for your kids to be in the place and to live it. Look online. Applications for the Colorado Youth Summit will be there in about 2 weeks. And I encourage you and your students to think about the place you're from, but also the place where you are, because where you are is our common ground. Have a great day.